Welcome to the Good Book Club podcast, where we make all our book club meetings available for viewers and listeners to enjoy. This month, we read and discussed the book Unorthodox, The Scandalous Rejection of My Hasidic Roots by Deborah Feldman. As a member of the strictly religious Satmar sect of Hasidic Judaism, Deborah Feldman grew up under a code of relentless enforced customs governing everything from what she could wear and to whom she could speak to what she was allowed to read. Yet in spite of her repressive upbringing, Deborah grew into an independent-minded young woman who eventually reclaimed her life outside of her faith tradition and forged a new path for herself and her son. This The Good Book Club meeting was originally held on Sunday, December the 8th, 2024. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Good Book Club. It's our December meeting. It's December the 8th, 11 a.m. Mountain Time. We are really excited. We have an excellent book to talk about today, and we have an excellent presenter. We'll go through a couple introductory slides really quick. And the first thing that we'll do, as we always do, is we'll read our mission statement. I'll go ahead and read that. We always read this at the top of every book club. It says, the Good Book Club was created to bring together nuanced Mormons, post-Mormons, and others with a shared interest in Mormonism. We are introspective, critical thinkers seeking to learn, connect, and build relationships through the catalyst of literature. We welcome all who are searching for a safe space to share authentic thoughts, feelings, and ideas through open dialogue and shared experiences relative to Mormon culture. As we deconstruct previous beliefs, we encourage all to find happiness in the process of discovering new religious ideologies, spiritualities, sorry, my little thing popped up here, and life philosophies. Okay, perfect. We love our statement. It kind of, it reminds us of why we started the Good Book Club 5 years ago. And I feel like we've stuck to our mission statement and we've accomplished everything we set out to do, which is great. So quick little announcement, Thrive in St. George again. This picture is from last year. Bruce was there, Melissa was there, Landon and I were there. It was really fun. Some other people from book club came. St. George, it's February 28th through March 2nd. You can see there's a really amazing lineup. Nemo the Mormon is coming over to this side of the pond. So that would be a reason right there to attend. Britt Hartley, Julie Hanks, John DeLynn. It's going to be pretty amazing. I know Landon and Melissa and I already have our tickets. So if anybody's inclined to go, we can have a little Good Book Club party on the side one of the nights. So go over to the thrivebeyondreligion.org website and you can get more information and grab tickets. Let's talk about a few upcoming events really quickly. This is our book list for the 24, only this last month left, right? 25 season. Bruce is going to put that in the chat. So if you guys want to copy and paste, keep that. It's also, of course, on our Facebook page under featured. And if you do get emails from us from the Good Book Club, I always try to include that in the emails, but it kind of shows you what's coming up. You can grab the books ahead and you can start reading or listening ahead. So this is our list all the way through August. And additional reading, there's always something new coming out. Heather Gay's book just dropped, Good Time Girl. This is the follow-up to Bad Mormon. She is one of the Real Housewives of Salt Lake. A few of us had the chance to talk to her and meet her at Thrive in Utah County last month, and she's pretty amazing. Her book is really interesting, so everybody grab a copy of that. Coming out in the spring is The Bible Says So by the amazing Dan McClellan. That's going to be incredible. We'll for sure, I think, put that on our list for the next year and try to get him to pop into the to book club because he's just wonderful. And really excited, Laura Lee Hall's book finally just dropped. We interviewed her a couple times on Mormonish and other podcasts have interviewed her. Dictates of Conscience, From Mormon High Priest to My New Life as a Woman. Can't recommend this book enough. Seriously, this is incredible. Go and grab that. It just dropped on Amazon and anywhere else you can find it. Our book for next month. Super excited. Second Class Saints. We have been waiting for this book ever since we interviewed Matt like a year and a half ago when he kind of described it. We're going to be discussing this on January 14th at 11 a.m. Mountain Time. The amazing Ron is going to be our discussion leader. And as far as I know, I'll double check with him again, but Matt said he'd drop in and join us for a little bit of the book club meeting. So that's going to be amazing. Now, this book is not yet on audio. So everybody needs to go grab the book, start reading, but it's supposed to come out on audio in January. So I don't know yet. I keep asking Matt. With our luck, it'll come out on audio January 15th. But as Bruce pointed out, there are an amazing series of Mormon stories, discussions with Matt. Like Bruce told us there are 17 available on Audible. And if you go to Mormon Stories podcast, I think he did a series of like 30 where they take a section or a concept in the book. Matt is on discussing, and as Melissa pointed out to us, a lot more content that he couldn't put in the book. So I say read the book. I say go to Mormon Stories. If there are particular topics that really grab you, listen to that. This book is just, like I said before, it pulls the curtain back on how they have always operated and how they continue to operate. So it's a really great book. So anyway, looking forward to that in January. Grab that, get reading. And I think that brings us to our book for today, which is Unorthodox by Deborah Feldman. And our discussion leader is Jackie. So we'll talk about this for a while. And then don't forget, at the very end, we have our mix and mingle that you can stay for, where we just hang out and chat. So Jackie, why don't you take this away?
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be with you. I certainly found this book to be incredibly meaningful and caused me to do a lot of deep thinking. And before I forget, trigger warnings. I don't know if they're going to specifically come up in our discussion, but it is a book that requires trigger warnings. I'm very glad I read it, but there's some difficult things in there. So please be aware of trigger warnings for any of you who are in the chat on the book club with us and are aware of that. This is the copy of mine. It's a little different than your others. I've got this front cover, and I just learned so much from it. So here's our opening page, and we can go down to the next slide. And I just kind of wanted to give you a background of Judaism and Hasidics and how all of this works. And in terms, there's many, many sects of Judaism, but the two main groups we're going to talk about are the Ashkenazi Jews and the Seraphic Jews. And if we can go to the next slide. The Ashkenazi Jews started to leave the Jerusalem first century, and they kind of migrated throughout the Holy Roman Empire. And they started in the Middle Ages to migrate into Northeastern Europe. And at that time, they started to speak Yiddish. And Yiddish is really High German, written in the Hebrew alphabet, but there's some Polish in it and some Russian. And the reason why they spoke Yiddish is because they felt like Hebrew was too sacred. That was God's language. You don't use that language. And so they developed this Yiddish, which is really just as High German. So if you followed anything on Deborah Feldman, she moves to Berlin after she writes all of this, and she picks up German just like that because it's so close. She probably feels like German was easier for her to speak than English. The Ashkenazi Jews derived their biblical name from this figure in the Bible called Ashkenaz. And, it's always the lineage, right? It's the genealogy, and it's the first son of Gomer, son of Japheth, son of Noah. So that's kind of this idea of the Ashkenazi Jews. And then let's flip to the next slide. The Seraphic Jews is just basically defined as Jews of Spain. So at the same migration out of Jerusalem in the late first century, let's see, go back, there we go. This set of Jews went into the Iberian Peninsula in the first centuries of the CE, and they did great. And, they thrived under the Islamic dynasty there until the English Reconquista, where the Jews were forced to either convert, migrate, or be executed. So this group of Jews who did not either convert or were slaughtered went into the Middle East, North Africa, and into South and Southeastern Europe. They do not speak Yiddish. And after the Holocaust, this is where most of the people who went to Jerusalem, they are the Sephardic Jews. Now, I bring this up because it's so interesting throughout the book. It's extremely tribal, right? And so we have the Hasidic Jews, the Seraphic Jews, and then there's liberal Jews, there's secular Jews. And if you caught it in the book, Deborah Feldman's brother-in-law falls in love with a Seraphic Jew, and they don't want him to marry her, even though she's Hasidic. She's in a Hasidic group, Because she's seraphic, oh, that's a little lower, we're higher up in the Azakansi. And he's Odin, he won't eat, he's on this fast. And finally they say, well, we'll let him marry. So I think it's interesting. The more extreme these groups get, the more it's us versus them, us versus them, us versus them. And, and I'm jumping ahead, but they, when Israel has their day of independence and they create Jerusalem, this group of Satmars go out and picket and say down with Jerusalem. And so they even see their fellow Jews as an enemy. And, it just fascinates me how many areas they're split, and it's us versus them, and the level of it. So this is your Sephardic Jews, and your Hasidic Jewish group, which we're going to focus in, are the Azakansi. Okay, next slide. Now, this is a term I want to bring in. My background is geography, by the way. I have a master's in geography and taught at the BYU Salt Lake Center for several years. So this is my happy place. Shattered belt is a geopolitical term where a region is caught in the middle of two political powers and it becomes important strategically. So here I am, a geography major, and I could not figure out how to get a map onto this slideshow. So we do not have a slideshow, but let me explain. Northern Europe, all of northern Germany into Poland, pushing up into Ukraine, Belarus, all the way to Russia, really beyond to the Urals, it's just flat plains. There's no mountains. There's no difficult terrain. It is just flat. And this is why this has been an area of so much conflict and so many wars, because there's no barrier. As a contrast, why is Switzerland able to be neutral and be neutral for so many years? It was mountains, surrounded by mountains. It is so hard to defend and to penetrate mountainous areas. So these Jewish people migrated all through Northern Europe. They went into Russia, Belarus, all this area. And then they get caught in all of these wars. I only put these last three, the Napoleonic Wars, World War I and World War II. And they always become the scapegoat, right? Here you are in war. Here you are, not a lot of money. People are starving. So who do you blame it on? These crazy Jewish people. And they're going to take over the world and the Jewish protocol. And so it causes even more of these groups to really run for the hills, put the walls up, stay in the fort. This is the enemy. And this is where this real extreme Judaism comes from, because they're always caught in these grand world wars, and they're always the scapegoat. And we know the horrible stories. We don't need to go into it. They throw all the Jewish people in their synagogue and burn them alive. So you can see where the paranoia comes and why they're always being shuffled. Now, it's interesting with the Satmars, which we're going to get to. They end up in kind of the mountains of Transylvania, which is the border of Hungary and Romania. And they hang out there, and they don't have a lot of money. And so the Romanian princes, they just say, oh, let them be. They're this weird group. They're up in their own way. And it kind of allows them to stay together and stable. Now, let's go to our next slide. Okay, Hasidic Jews, let's get a little background on that. Hasidic Jews is defined or translated as pious ones. So I found that kind of interesting. That's what a Hasid is. They're pious. So in the 18th century, there was a spiritual revival in Western Ukraine, and it spread throughout Eastern Europe. And the revival was based on this mysticism, which drew heavily on the Kabbalah, and their text was the Zohar, and it was authored in the late 13th century. So what would happen is there would be this one man that would kind of pop up in these villages, and he became this mystic, and he was really revered. And you remember in the book, the Kabbalist comes in and he kind of tells her fortune. So in the late 1700s, that's why we have the 1800s, people flocked to these mystics. Well, the mystics stay in place. So the people go to this mystic leader. They kind of make him their Rebbe, which is rabbi. You can use it either way. He's always the the male leader. He's the dynasty's spiritual authority. And you have these different Hasid groups. There's the Hasid of Belts, the Hasid of Visnus, and in this case, we're talking about the Hasid of Satmar. And so this is kind of how it comes about. People, you can see in this uncertainty, and you're the sect group, that you want this spiritual, mystical person reading the Kabbalah so you can stay safe, so they can, tell your fortune and tell you what's happening in the future. So this is kind of the background of Hasidic Jews. Next slide. So the Satmar is Hungarian. It's also the same for Yiddish, and it's called Satmar, but it really means Saint Mary because they're in Romania, in Transylvania, and it's a Catholic town. But they call these dynasties or these courts, and this is this group, by the name of the town they're in. So these are the Satmars. And this hometown was founded by Rebbe Joel Teitelbaum, 1887, 1975. And the big important thing is that this Rebbe was hidden during World War II, and his life was saved. And his group of followers considered this a miracle. He was saved by God. So he gained even more control and power. And he moves to 1947 to New York, and they all follow with him. Now, we're going to get to this in the next slide, but the Hasidics, my voice sounded a little different. I think we're fine, right? Yes. The Hasidics believed that the reason the Holocaust happened was because their fellow parents and grandparents assimilated into the regular culture of Romania, or because there were people starting the country of Israel, and Jews were starting to go to Israel, which started in the late 1880s after all of these pogroms. And God was punishing the Jewish people for assimilating and for starting the country of Israel. It is God who will say when Israel should be a nation again. And how dare you people start a country on your own without God? So this group of Satmar, they double down. They double down and get as obedient as they can because they do not want God to destroy them again. Again, they're opposed to the state of Israel, to the assimilation. And the other thing that really sets these Hasidic groups apart, as the Satmars as well as other ones, is they are going to repopulate and have as many kids as they can. It's a revenge against Hitler. And these women, it's not uncommon to have 10 to 20 children. And you guys, this is happening today. I've watched a lot of videos. I've gone down the rabbit hole. 10 to 20 kids is just not uncommon because they're going to get their revenge on Hitler. Side note, this is a real problem in the state of Israel right now. And part of why we've got so many problems there is these Hasidic, ultra-Orthodox Jewish people in the state of Israel who refuse to fight, who refuse to modernize. They are having so many kids that they have got a real strong control in their democratic governments. And this is causing a lot of the turmoil. The average, secular, more liberal Jews cannot get their voice in, can't get the legislation passed. So they are a real force. Okay, next slide. So the Holocaust, of course, causes this incredible generational trauma. And as we said, the Hasidic group went, we had the Holocaust because God is punished us for assimilating and for starting Israel. And then the other side of this was the Zionist movement, where they said, we don't believe in God. There's no God. No just God would do this. We are Jewish people. We are culturally Jewish. We're DNA Jewish. And by gosh, we're going to start our own country. We're going to come together. We're going to save ourselves as a people. And we're going to start speaking Hebrew. That's a huge no-no for Hasidics. You're speaking Hebrew, not Yiddish. And we're going to start our own country. So again, the divides amongst this group of peoples, it fascinates me how often they divide themselves. So that's kind of where people came out of the Holocaust. One thing I think is very important is that the Jewish people overall have united, and they accept each other and they love each other as Jewish people, minus these very, very Hasidic people. You get to be Jewish however you want. And I don't know if you know Jonathan Haidt. We've read a couple of his books, but he is a secular Jew. And he and his family practice all these Jewish holidays and festivals. They want to keep their culture alive. They want to keep their history alive, but he doesn't believe in God. So it's brought the Jewish people together in a really interesting way. You kind of get to do Judaism however you want to do Judaism. And they focus on keeping these wonderful festivals and holidays, and they focus on doing the Shabbat, this, their Sabbath, to keep their identity alive. And so all of this has come out of the trauma of the Holocaust. Okay, next slide. The 2006 succession dispute. This is small. I just, again, focusing on how divided they are. This just pops up quickly in the book. She's going to be married, and her fiance at the time comes, and he's wearing the felt flat hat, which says he is a follower of Aaron Teitelbaum. Okay, first of all, the first Teitelbaum we talked about died. Then his son took over, and then this son died. So these are the grandsons of our very first Teitelbaum. And there's a whole fight within the Satmars of whether you're a follower of Aaron, who is the first son, the eldest son, or Zalman, who is the third son. And to show who you are, if you're a follower of Aaron, you wear the flat felt hat. If you're a follower of the Zullies, you wear the big fur hat. So they're even divided within their own Satmar community. And she makes the comment, Zaidi, her grandfather, doesn't he know we're Zullies? Why is he having me engaged to an Aroni? That's what they call themselves, Aroni or Zullies. And when she talks to her then husband, he says, oh, we're neutral. We go both ways. So it fascinates me, you guys, how small they divide themselves, and they show it in these hats, how they dress. So that's just an interesting side note to this background. Let's go to the next slide. So the thesis. The author is freeing herself from her religious systems of control, while the Satmars are untethered from reality and shackled in shame and secrecy. So let's begin. That's kind of our thesis. And let's get in. I'm going to do one more thing. This is going to be fun before we start into the book. Bruce is going to lead us. We're going to do some poll. We have 12 poll questions, which are basically covering how Mormon were you or are you? When I say were, I'm meaning growing up as a child. Okay. So how Mormon were you? Refer to how you were raised in your family of origin. Okay, Bruce.
Okay. Can you see the poll questions?
No.
I can.
Okay, so answer the poll questions. The first one, excluding vacation and holidays, were you allowed to eat out on Sundays? The second one, excluding vacations and holidays, were you allowed to swim on Sundays? Number three, were you or females in your family allowed to wear bikinis? Number four, were you or your family allowed to watch R-rated movies? 5, were you or your family allowed to use playing cards? 6, were you or your family allowed to use swear words? And I added the hell no to that one. I restrained myself from adding another derivation of a swear word there. 7, were you or your family allowed to watch TV on Sunday? Were you or your family allowed to change out of church clothes on Sunday? Number 9, did you attend all youth activities? In your family, did men participate in scouting, with Eagle Scout being expected? And number 11, did you or your family drink Coke or Pepsi? And number 12, did your parents attend the temple regularly? So try to answer, everyone, answer as many as you can on that, and we will then do a reveal of the results. I now realize that I put all these questions together and I should have had them separate, but I'm learning on.
Bruce, I was a convert when I was 22. So
you were allowed to wear a bikini.
yeah. I
Mark,
could do anything I
Mark,
wanted.
Mark, vote as if how you raised your family with those
Okay.
questions. How did you and your family live looking at those questions?
All right.
Any converts look at it that way. The minute you joined, how would you look at those questions?
Okay, we're going to go about another 30 seconds, and then we will end the poll and show the results. And that, I'm sure, will give us some discussion points.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear where people landed on this.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll in about 5 seconds. So if you're still trying to answer some questions. Okay, now I'm going to share the results. So we will go through them.
Bruce, I can't see the results. So can you kind of talk orally so I know what's going on, please?
Are you on two screens?
I don't know what that means. I've got my big screen in front of me, and that's all I know.
Okay, so excluding vacations and holidays, were you allowed to eat out on Sundays? 11% or 2 people of the 19 that answered said yes, but 17 people or 89% said no. So in general, no eating out on Sundays. Number 2, excluding vacations or holidays, were you allowed to swim on Sundays?
Excuse me, Bruce, they're saying it's hard to hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me just here. Okay, I'm working on adjusting speakers.
I can keep reading it while you're doing it. Let's
Yeah.
see. Excluding vacations and holidays, were you allowed to swim? No, we just did that one. And that says that 84% could not swim. I was one of those for sure. Were you or females in your family allowed to wear bikinis, right? 21% said yes, 79% said not at all. Were you or your family allowed to watch R-rated movies? 33% yes, 67% no. Were you or your family allowed to use playing cards? Oh my gosh, that was a huge one in my family. 72% said yes, but there's the 28% of us who that was definitely of the devil, could not do that. Were you or your family allowed to use swear words? 17% yes, 39% no, and 44% hell no. Were you or your family allowed to watch TV on Sunday? 67% yes, 33% no. Some people like me, it might have been a hybrid. Wild Kingdom and The Wonderful World of Disney in the evening, yes, but nothing during the day. Were you or your family allowed to change out of church clothes on Sunday? To me, this is the biggest tell. 78% yes, 22% like me, church clothes from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. You did not take those off. Did you attend all youth activities? 67% said yes, they went to everything. 33% said no. There was some discretion there. In your family, did men participate in the scouting? Eagle Scout, 72% yes, yep, and 28% no. Did you or your family drink Coke or Pepsi? Oh, that's a big one. Look at that, 61% no. That caffeine thing was huge, and 39% yes. Did your parents attend the temple regularly? 71% yes, and 29% no. So very interesting results.
I find it fascinating. Oh, somebody made a comment, I believe it was Joe in the comments, that said they couldn't use face cards, but they could use rook cards. And I grew up with a family that played all the games I played, but those rook cards came out. I mean, isn't it, you know, how we go around the system, and the cognitive dissonance is a riot. So the reason I want to do this is because here's the background, then we can talk about it. I kind of considered myself pretty average, common sense Mormon being raised. We could change out of our clothes. We could watch TV. The ball games were on. The minute church was over, football games were on. My parents swore. My dad told me he had a license to swear. It was given to him he was allowed to, but I didn't have that license. But we rolled our eyes at Utah County and said, oh, they're kind of crazy down there. And I just thought, we're just these really devout Mormons. And, my parents went to the temple every month, but they liked to go. And so a couple of years ago, I'm going to just say this point, and then if anybody wants to make comments on this poll, I want to open it up. A couple of years ago, as I was deconstructing, I just got really fascinated, and I thought, these fundamentalist religions, I'm hearing this word all the time, and they say Mormonism's fundamentalist, and no, those are the polygamists. The polygamists are the fundamentalists. That's not our church. And I just kind of Googled and researched around and looked for characteristics of a fundamentalist religion. And I went, oh my gosh, I read these characteristics, which we'll get to, and I said, I was raised in a fundamentalist religion. And I think I ran around the house for 3 to 6 months and said to my husband, I'm a fundamentalist. I'm a fundamentalist. I've been raised a fundamentalist. I'm in a fundamentalist religion. So that's why I kind of wanted to put these voting questions to you all. And I'd love to hear some discussion. Did you always think you were in this Orthodox fundamentalist religion? Was it news to you? Did you feel like your family was kind of just really lax? You went out to lunch on dinner? Anybody want to comment on that? Bruce.
Okay, can people hear me now? I turned my volume up a little. My family wasn't extreme. Like my family was surrounded by John Birchers, people who followed Ezra Taft Benson. And my dad kind of stayed away from that. He didn't want anything to do with that. My dad was my bishop for 12 years while I was growing up, 2 different times. And he was gone. I was a church orphan. My mom was gone a lot. So they didn't, I think they knew that I went swimming on Sunday. I know I was caught skinny dipping, but that was fine with them. They grew up in Colorado. My dad on a ranch. Skinny dipping was normal. They didn't frown on that. But we would go out to dinner anytime we were traveling or after state conference because it was 30 miles away. We watched Disney and Wild Kingdom on Sunday night. But then that's when church was 2 blocks. In the morning, you came home for lunch, and in the evening, you didn't have time to turn on the TV until the evening. So I was kind of moderately, Boy Scouts wasn't even a thing when I was growing up. I was in charge of it, but I never knew anybody who ever worked on merit badges or cared about it because this was in the 70s in Southern California, and that was just not even on my radar. So kind of interesting. I was more middle of the road. And
Rebecca.
California was more middle of the road.
I think California was for sure. I was raised in Washington State, and I was raised as Orthodox as you can get. Even Uno cards were considered a gateway card at my family. I was the only one that went to BYU as a freshman and had no idea how to play any of the card games, that everybody played. But I was aware at a very young age that my family was different than the other families in the ward. That we were living a different higher law, Sunday clothes all day and just so strict on every single rule, fasting 24 hours, and my friends didn't do that. And I recognized that, so to me, it was clear that my family was living, in a different way than others. So I understood the differences, and I would love to go to other people's houses on Sunday, because when it was Fast Sunday, I could eat there, or I could watch TV there. I recognized that what was happening at my house was different. And I definitely gravitated toward the lighter version of Mormonism, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think this just illustrates there are just so many levels. And I think about when I first got married, we didn't watch TV growing up on Sunday at all, except for in the evening. And I get married, and first Sunday together, we come home from church, the TV goes on, football comes on. I was horrified. How did I not know this about the person I had married, right? That he was such a sinner, And I remember saying, well, you're not supposed to. And he goes, what are you talking about? Of course, that's what you do. My family, we both looked at each other like aliens. We had been raised so differently and didn't really understand. We were both Mormons, but again, so many shades of gray. So it took me like one Sunday before I went, oh, okay, I'll adopt your point of view. That's nice. I'll go watch, Little House on the Prairie in the bedroom, and you watch football out there. So many different ways to Mormon, I think, is what this shows.
Thank you. That you said it perfectly, Rebecca. That's just exactly where I came from. Mark.
Yes. Well, as you know, I'm a convert. So when I got married and I got kids, I was very strict for myself, but not for my kids or for my wife. They had their free agency. And when my daughter said that she didn't want to go anymore when she was about 10 years old, I said, that's fine. And I always asked questions at the dinner table to let them learn them how to think critical. And there were really fun experiences with that. So, yeah, like I said, I was very strict for myself, but not for somebody else. And about Coca-Cola, I have a fun story, I thought. I have this book. It's it's Working the Divine Miracle by Henry D. Moyle, who was in the first presidency. He went to a state conference, and he said, people say that you can't drink Coca-Cola. And he took out a bottle of Coca-Cola, pulled in a glass, and drank it. I said, and he said, I think you understand what I mean. So I thought that was fun.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Jackie, Brenda has her hand up.
Brenda.
Yeah, hi. I consider myself kind of a Benson Mormon, just like John Birch Society, I guess what you call it. I think it's an age difference. My dad grew up, he's the same age as President Benson was. And during that time, they were really indoctrinated into things like no playing cards and no Coke and no, just can't do anything on Sunday, and all that stuff. And then and I grew up in Utah, so it seemed like everybody was kind of following that. My brother was, going and hanging out with the real fundamentalist polygamy Mormon group that was in Salt Lake, like down the street. So, we had discussions of polygamy, and my parents would tell me, oh, you're going to have to practice it. Maybe not this life, but in the next. And I said, well, I don't like that idea. And she said, well, you might change your mind when you die. So we had the discussions as though we were fundamentalist, but that we're just not doing it because of the stance of the church. So it was quite interesting. And then when I was growing up, I'd have parties like with the Mutual that I would go to. And then one night they did rated R movie, and I was shocked, and I wanted to leave because I was afraid I was going to get, I don't know what was going to happen to me, but it really kind of cognitive dissonance there. So I kind of felt like what kind of Mormon am I? Because why? I almost thought, what kind of Mormons are these? Because I thought I'm doing the right stuff. My friends are playing with face cards. We call them face cards. Um, and they didn't seem to be bothered. But then I had another friend who wouldn't have her family drink, they wouldn't be able to drink chocolate because it had caffeine in it. And so they'd only have carob. So there was like people trying to one up each other. But
yeah, it's called Mormon one-upping. It's out there.
But I kind of I didn't know what to think. I think I was just so in it. And my family, very similar to a lot of the, I guess, Bensonite type people. I don't know if you call them Bensonites, but also the miniskirts were a big deal. Although when I was growing up, there were no miniskirt issues. That was another thing that they talked a lot about in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Brenda. I see Steph and Caitlin. Steph, and then we'll go Caitlin.
Hi. I just think it's interesting how you can get that fundamentalist part a lot from your parents, but also just outside. My parents, I didn't really have rules, but we were active. My dad was a bishop. But I didn't even know what General Conference was until I was like late primary and was at a sleepover at a friend's house, and they were watching conference, and that was the first time I learned what it was. And I was born and raised in Utah. So as I think it's very dangerous and something I feel like I escaped and I'm hoping to, give the gift of choice to my children is as I got through those teenage years, I chose the church, like the more fundamentalist the thought process, it felt like the closer to God that was. And so, when I was a teenager, my mom actually picked out a bikini for me. And I felt like I was choosing God and I would not wear it. She'd buy me tank tops and so I did it to myself. And that to me is very terrifying looking back now, and something that makes these fundamentalist ideologies so dangerous is you can do it to yourself.
I think you nailed it. You think it's getting closer to God. It's just, boy, it's a hook that reels us all in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. Caitlin?
Yeah, I grew up in a very much more fundamentalist kind of approach. My dad especially was very, very, we don't do anything on Sundays except, play games with our family and do family history, no movies. We avoided caffeine. We did all of that. And then I was like Steph, I internalized that and became pretty scrupulous as a teenager. My dad often quoted, and I don't remember the word for word quote, but it was any faith, to have the faith required to produce miracles, you need a faith that requires everything of you, something along those lines. So that's something I grew up with. And I saw my older siblings, some of them, there was a variety of reactions. Some of them were also pretty scrupulous. Some of them were a lot more nuanced. And they were kind of the black sheep of the family, even though, that was black sheep only by our terms. But it was definitely interesting to see how it's affected each of my siblings in different ways.
Isn't that interesting? We Mormon even differently among our siblings. Thank you so much for commenting. Dana.
Hey, I think I'm here. I am on vacation in San Diego, and it's wonderful and beautiful, but wanted to make sure you could hear. So we were in the family that just couldn't handle themselves, hoarders, nothing was in control. Dad just did his Marine scream all day. But I've kind of wondered if that's part of what you're talking about with, Mormon one-upping, and like, because there was so much wrong in life, like, but you could be 100% Mormon, you could be 150% Mormon. Even when you couldn't handle the rest of it because of those appearances. So we were one of those families that we couldn't eat chocolate, answered, every one of those poll questions. And anywhere we would go. My mom found out that I ate chocolate once when I was 12, and I still remember, oh, Danica, just this horrible.
Mm.
I felt like I am going to hell because I ate chocolate.
My goodness.
But so the interesting part with that, I think, even more than how I grew up, is that I went on to raise my kids, one-upping my family's one-upping Mormon.
Okay.
Wow.
So we homeschooled exclusively until my oldest was in ninth grade. We were in a vow, the whole what's their name? Daybells thing.
Oh, wow.
We
Wow.
were in a vow. I don't think I subscribed to the teachings, but I was so afraid. I was just so afraid. So that's part of what hearing all of your stories, hearing how everybody is um kind of relaying how their family were, I started to reflect like, why in the world then would I, having grown up how I did, why would I pass that on to my kids? And why do they? Why in this book? Why do people keep going? And then they split off and they create another one-upped version of that religion. I was just so afraid because
Mm.
you would think being raised how I was, it would go the opposite, but it was like, okay, well, here's all of these pieces that they weren't able to control. So I'm going to help my family, be able to get to the celestial kingdom and all that good stuff. Um, but I think such a big part is finding community. And you have a community that is willing to take that on, and then you can kind of one up that community if you want. So that homeschooling group and a vow, and like the deeper it went, the more in you were with people who knew and understood, and they had this little secret that not everybody else has. Not everybody else knows. Now I started to think and understand this just can't be real, and started to see a lot of the problems with it as other members of a vow started doing that. I guess what you'd call one-upping, right? Um, like there was a group that would of women that would go dress in their temple clothes and veil their heads and do the true order of prayer
Oh,
because they
wow.
wanted to know, like, when we have to go move up to the mountains, we need to be so spiritually prepared that we're going to be able to get these answers. And I thought, well, wait a minute, the temple's really special. Like, I don't think we're supposed to do that. And so that is what started getting me out of it, was seeing all of these other people trying to go one more, one better. Now, the problem is, and here's kind of how it relates with the book too. The problem is I left. We didn't participate anymore. We had plenty of discussions with my husband and I. We never told the kids what we thought. We never said, "Hey, I just want to make sure that you understand all of these friends and, everything." I really think they're crazy. Um, and not doing the right thing and going overboard. I think they're dangerous. All these things that I was starting to learn. I never told my kids. That was so long ago. I think my oldest was in seventh grade and she's 28 now. But 2 or 3 years ago, actually, so 3 years ago, before she got married, she came to me and like wanted this really serious discussion, did all the prepping, did all this, like, I love you so much, Mom, and I know you tried your best when you raised us and all this, but I need to let you know that a vow was a lie. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know. She's so shocked. So she thought this whole time, because I didn't say anything,
Yeah.
she still thought, this is our community, this is our thing, this is our friends. And I didn't realize, even though we had left, all those kids of the people were still talking about all of it. So
Mm.
she was still getting fed information. My three oldest were still getting fed information because the other kids were participating and hearing it from their parents. Um, So, you know, I'm really interested too, as everybody's talking, and in a lot of stories about, how and when did you involve your kids? And I'm still even trying to figure that out now that we've officially left, and I'm deconstructing and going, what is just leaving? Because I can't leave my family. I don't have any desire to. Um, but my family who is still LDS, and obviously, they all know that I've left, and a little bit of why. But how do I now this time make sure that they understand that I don't believe in any of this? I think a lot of it's dangerous. I think, all of this stuff. And um part of what I see in a lot of books that have to do with any sort of a cult, but especially something like you're saying, fundamentalist. I would never have thought growing up that we were fundamentalist, or typical Mormon stuff that it's fundamentalist. I did
Thank
think
you,
of
Dana.
how was. Yeah.
Dana, thank you. I've got to get other people going.
Oh no, you go ahead.
And I sure appreciate your comment about the fear. That's really going to stay with me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's hear Joe.
Yeah, just really quick. There's going to be a part in the book that I'm sure is coming up soon where they have it's like a pride and joy to find loopholes. And I find it amazing through this discussion, like what the loopholes are that we as Mormonisms coming through. But yeah, just my thought and connecting back to that.
The loopholes are fascinating. And talking about Mormon one-upping, I had a friend who, when she went to BYU, they weren't allowed in their family to drink Coke or Pepsi. And she would not date a boy at BYU who drank Coke or Pepsi. So, it's just, and you don't see it, right? We have no idea we're doing it. Let's go to the next slide. So, as I said a couple of years ago, I started to try to figure out who are these fundamentalists and what are the characteristics. And I came across a review by this book, Against Religion, written by Thomas Pataki. And he is a professor of philosophy at the University of Melbourne. And he just kind of researched all these fundamentalist groups that come out of Christianity, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Judaism, Islam, Book of Mormons didn't even show up. And what he kind of came about overall is that it's a belief in strict and literal interpretation of scripture. They're counter-modernists, and its extreme religion stems from the same roots of fear, misery, and delusion. And I think Dana made that excellent point of fear. I think she really, really gave us a good clue there. And one of his overriding films, which I kind of hit, but I need to hit it further, is there's a great pull of narcissism throughout them all. It's just really based on narcissism. So let's go to the next slide. The 10 characteristics of fundamentalism. Now, we did the poll, okay? So I want you to think about the poll. I want you to think about how Mormon were we all. I want you to think about how you lived the religion as a child, as an adult. And then let's go through these 10 characteristics that Pataki came up with in analyzing fundamentalist religions. Now, I'm not great. This is my first slideshow. So it's going to be, this slide's going to show the first 5, and the next slide's going to show 5. I didn't know how to get 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's start with the first one. Counter-moderist identity is rooted in a past golden age, restore the golden past. Now, in Christianity right now, it's go back to the 1950s, leave it to Beaver, Father Knows Best, and the golden past of the founding fathers. They're often assertive, clamorous, and often violent. I think we're seeing that more and more, especially with the far Christian right. I think we can call the violent part with our own group in Mormonism with the Desnats. Third, you're chosen. You're the elect. The saved are burdened with a special mission on behalf of deity to benefit the world. So we're superior. I mean, isn't this the whole covenant path? We've got the restored gospel. We've got to send it to everybody. Number 4, marks of distinction. And these distinctions are to show you're superior. The Mormon one-upping. Identity, part of the narcissistic struggle of being special. They wear skull caps, turbans, I can't say the word, hijab, the black crosses, circumcision, initiations, baptisms, food taboos, holy times. They create separateness from the evil outside world. I think we all know our taboos. I mean, we look at the extremes. Some people on this discussion weren't allowed to eat chocolate. The cold caffeine, the hot caffeine. We can drink the Pepsi, but not the coffee. We know the rituals in the temple. And then number 5, one true religion and one correct way of life must defend from inroads from other religions and secularism, always under persecution and threat, and you are either all in or all out, no middle ground. I keep thinking of when President Hinckley said the Book of Mormon is either the correct book or it is a fraud. I think about the apologists who are on the far right and how they look at the liberal apologist as a threat. Does anybody want to comment on these first 5? Is Dana still wanting to comment? Is that from old?
It's probably still from old because I couldn't figure out how to do it. I'll lower. I made all my comments.
Thank you, Dana. Bruce.
Well, yeah, the marks of distinction. This just hit me so strong when I read the book. When the Satmar community in Europe, the married women had to wear wigs over their hair. Now, I worked in financial services in Los Angeles, and I dealt with this all the time. The Hasidic people that I worked with, when we went to a party, I knew I did not shake their wives' hands, and we talked about it, what the protocols were. But when the guy came up and said, women have to shave their heads underneath their wigs. When I read that was just after I heard the concept of temporary commandments. And it was just this ratcheting down of control, in this case, over women. And I'm going like, okay, so this distinction, they were having to ratchet up the distinction with women shaving their heads. And I see this coming within the Brighamite Mormonism is temporary commandments where they can get away with a lot of shit that is going to come down the road that isn't based in any of the previous scriptures. That was just my thought.
Thank you, Bruce. Kemi?
Yes, thanks. Sorry, forgot to unmute. In the part that I'm thinking about in the book, it wasn't even enough to shave your head. Everybody had to do that, which I find horrifying, even though my hair's really short. But to have that choice made for you, I just think is horrible. But then the women were in competition again. Deborah's mother-in-law, it was, she wore that head covering, and Deborah's family wore wigs, and that was fine for them. But the mother-in-law was more pious. She was more devout. She was more devoted because she wore the head covering and didn't go out in public without it, where, it was like, even there, it was that comparison where I'm more righteous than you, even though none of us have hair and we all cover it up. But because you wear wigs, that makes me better because I wear a wig and the head covering, or just the head covering. I don't need the hair. I don't need that that vanity that you do. And I hate that. I hate where that fundamentalist one-upsmanship, you're always looking for a way to elevate yourself, but that never comes without putting somebody else down, even if it's unintentional.
Oh, so well said, Kemi. Thank you. And I think patriarchy just pits women against each other.
Absolutely.
Kemi, thank you. Cameron.
Yeah, just a quick story. I been a non-believing participant in the church for like over 10 years now, and I kind of thought I'd deprogrammed a lot of stuff about myself. But so I just recently had an interview with the stake president, because I wanted to meet with the general authority about the transgender policy because I have a trans kid. But anyway, he asked me a question in the interview, and I had pre-rehearsed my answer to this question if I ever got asked this question in advance, like for the last 3 years. I stopped wearing my garments like 3 years ago and just made that personal choice. But he asked me, "Are you wearing your garments anymore?" And my pre-rehearsed answer was, "That's not appropriate. I'm not going to answer that question." But I still answered the question and told him no. And I couldn't believe it. Like I was like shocked in the moment that I did it. But it just shows how deep some of the programming we get about these marks of distinction go. And I really wanted to speak to that general authority. So I was kind of like I think I was in a mindset of, hey, I'll just do whatever I need to do to get through this interview. But I was just shocked that I answered it that way. And even though some of these like Orthodox Judaism things seem a little more extreme to me, it reminds me that we still have these things within mainstream Mormonism as well, these different marks of superiority and distinction and things that are part of our tradition. So there is some fundamentalism here still, I think, even though it's maybe not quite as extreme as some of the other fundamentalist groups.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Okay, next slide. Let's do the next. Oh, Rebecca, you say something, then we'll go to the next slide.
I just had one quick comment. We were talking about this at the top of the show. I've been made aware of some social media posts on faithful Mormon sites where women are discussing, LDS women are discussing, should we start wearing head coverings? You know, we already wear garments for modesty, but what if we took it a step farther? What if we also wore head coverings to show our modesty, to show our devotion? Now, interestingly, on this forum, a lot of other LDS women wrote back and said, oh, come on. But a lot of them wrote back and said, I'd never thought of that. Now that's very interesting. Yes, that would show modesty. That would show my devotion. So I figure, I think that there's this level of scrupulosity where you just have to go up and up and up with the distinction and the superiority. So I'm going to predict right now, in the next couple of years, we are going to see some kind of, voluntary, just women doing this on their own, because some of the women in this post express they already do that. They wear a scarf to church just to cover their hair, just to be a little more modest. So seriously, you can't make this up. And to me, it's terrifying.
Oh, terrifying is the perfect word. Okay. Have we got to the second slide?
See, I think we're still on 5.
Okay. They go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 twice because I couldn't figure it out. Inerrant holy book and a charismatic leader, literal obedience, mandatory. So some of these holy books are the Vedas from the Hindu religions, the Torah, we all now know Judaism and the Satmar, the Bible, the Quran, and I put in parentheses the Book of Mormon because this professor did not study Mormonism, but here's our holy book. And I think it's interesting that did I hear it from RFM? I believe I heard it from RFM. Mormons don't believe the Book of Mormon. They really don't believe it, but it has to be literal. They lose their minds if it's not historically accurate. So here's this literal coming in. Number 2, law and authority come from God. It's a theocracy. So you're really looking at a theocracy. And 3, female sexuality, clear boundaries between men and women, controlled by patriarchy, women subordinate, polluted, taboo sexual practices linked with homophobia. And I'm going to go to 4, sexual behavior is a major concern, no masturbation, homophobic, no sex before marriage. And I think we can make the comparison quickly. Here they are going to the Rebbe, the Torah says, okay, if you study the scriptures, you get to have sex once a week. If you're traveling, you get to have it like twice a year when you come home. Like they're telling you when you can even, have sex with your married spouse. The women and their menstrual cycle, and the Rebbe saying, yes, you're clean, you're not clean. And I thought, certainly we're not to that extreme, but we've all got to go confess our sexual sins to the bishop. And I thought it was so fascinating. I listened to the Mormon stories where they brought on the women who dated, the single women dating in the Mormon world. And these women are 25 and 28 and 30. I mean, they're mature adults and they maybe have a little whoopsie and they're hauling themselves to the bishop to confess. And they're grown adults. It's fascinating. Fundamentalism infantiles us all. We're just like little kids who can't make our own decision. And the last one, fundamentalism and nationalism converge. Government that will prioritize right morals and right culture for the nation. So these are the 10 characteristics. Can we all just do a raise of hand? We don't have a poll question, but maybe those of you who can see the chat or whatever, see everybody's hands. Can everybody kind of get ready and put their hand to get ready? How many of you think you were raised in a fundamentalist religion? Raise your hand, yes. If you don't think you were, put a no down. And then can everybody look and see what's going on? Do you feel like you were... Are we coming? This is what threw me. This is what completely threw me. And I said, oh my gosh, I've been raised as a fundamentalist. What are we looking at? How are people viewing it?
Oh, we have like 8 people with their hands raised.
Okay. Maybe others.
Some yes, some no.
So some no. I love that. Anybody who said no, could somebody raise their hand and chime in? I want to hear, because this is the fun of it. Okay, we've got hands up. We're going to start with Dana. Or is this up from voting?
This is up for voting.
Does anybody want to chime in who said no, that they did not think they were raised in a fundamentalist religion?
I can chime in.
Is this Joe?
This is Joe, yeah. So I think, and it always takes me back to that book, The Righteous Mind. I don't think anyone thinks they're in something out of the ordinary. And so they always feel like they're part of the mainstream until they step back and look at it. So fundamentalism to me was always like those other guys, the weirdos, whatever. But yet I was very orthodox in the things that I believe. Like I said, I was surprised other people knew about the chocolate thing and the caffeine. Like we were literally at a pop machine and we had nothing. My mom bought a drink and a Coke fell out. She literally threw it away. We just sat there like, well, okay, we're not going to have anything. But that seems very fundamentalist, So I would say no, I wasn't raised in a fundamentalist group, but maybe I was. It's one of those kind of the way your brain processes it, I think. But I'm curious to hear what others have to say.
Thank you, Joe. Dave?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so Jackie, I had voted yes. I grew up in a fundamentalist religion. But then on second thought, when I contrast my experience with what I read Deborah Feldman and other youth in the book experienced, I felt what happened to me paled in comparison.
Oh, absolutely.
And then I realized the concepts are similar: control, patriarchy, and the source of harm. The causes of the harm are the same, but the degree, I almost feel embarrassed to even compare what happened to me with what happened to these youth in the book.
And I think that's the sneaky part of fundamentalism is no matter how strict and controlling your group is, there's always somebody worse. And that's how you get tricked. That's how you don't think you're involved. But at the same time, I want to take both sides here. I know people who they ate out every Sunday. They got to wear the bikinis. TV was on. Everybody could have an open conversation. So I absolutely believe that people and individuals and families were raised with these kind of fundamentalist rules, but their family didn't live them. It's just very individual and very complex. Landon.
Or Maria has her hand up.
Oh, Maria first. Let's see. Are we going to hear from Maria?
Maybe there we go.
Mine was part of the poll, the question that you asked, so I don't really have any comments.
Oh, okay, I'll
thank you, Maria. Thank you. Landon.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think I ever really believed I grew up in a fundamentalist religion because I grew up in Utah where everybody lived that religion. It was just normal. And I just assumed that's how every religion was and everybody was. I mean, I hardly even knew anyone who wasn't. LDS. So because of that, I never saw, I don't think I realized it until I'd already left the church and started not living all of those things, that I started to realize, oh my gosh, they had so much control over me that I didn't realize. So I never felt, for most of my life, I never felt like I was part of a fundamentalist religion. I think looking back now, I would say, yes, I was, but I never realized it, just because in Utah, it's just normal. And I was pretty middle of the road Mormon. I wasn't strict Mormon. I wasn't unstrict. I wasn't progressive, but I wasn't real strict either.
And I am very thankful. I do think it's a fundamentalist religion, but as we all know from reading this book, it could be way, 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 way worse, even just within our polygamous. So I'm the same way. And my family was moderate as well within this. So I don't feel like I had a lot of damage. So I can see a lot of healthiness that came out of my childhood. But the concepts, these 10 characteristics, I mean, like I said, I was processing that for 3 to 6 months. Who's next on the hands?
Jeffrey.
We'll give them a second. If they're like me, I'm not good at navigating. Jeffrey, can we hear you? Jeffrey, we'll come back to you. Let's go to, is it Steph next?
Or Rebecca?
Yeah, I think me. I just have a quick comment. I think I've seen recently on so much social media and just in personal interactions, everything that I considered a tenet of the church, which was more fundamental, that my family followed, people say, well, that was just your family. That wasn't what the church was. The church wasn't telling you that. There's this concerted effort to sort of rewrite this history of fundamentalism. And I don't know why they're trying to do that, trying to say that was just your family. They misunderstood. They did it wrong. That wasn't the church. I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but there's this sort of protection that TBMs are kind of doing, saying that's not real. That was just a mistake your family made. When I know it wasn't, because there were a lot of people doing that, and it was being said over the pulpit. So I think it's important to keep discussing this kind of stuff, the way that we were raised. And as we talked about, there are degrees within families, but people seem to have forgotten very quickly that this extreme element of fundamentalism existed in the church and still exists today. And I don't know why people are trying so hard to say, just blame the individual and blame the family and say that wasn't the church. No one was telling you that from the pulpit. No one told your parents they had to buy 5,000 pounds of rice. Yes, they did. They heard that from the pulpit, right? Of course they did. But, and then I find myself saying, well, no, in my day, and then you just sound really old. But I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, this concerted effort to try to dial back the idea that we were raised in a very fundamental way.
Appreciate the insights. Hey, I look 2 more comments, then we'll get moving. Steph and then Bruce.
Yeah, just 2 things. I want to validate what Rebecca said, because I'm proof that it is true that it did come from the church, because I clung to the church to aggravate my parents because they were not as devout. So I heard from the pulpit about food storage and went to my parents, told them I was concerned, and then they bought the food storage. I went to BYU to piss off my parents, kind of thing. So I got it all from the church itself, from the pulpit. I did not get it from my family, and that's where I got it. But then the other thing is, I think, I guess it's a question. Do you think you can understand that you had some fundamentalist characteristics in your life? I don't think you can realize that unless you've been exposed to something different. Like in the book, she was able to read books, and so her mind was open to that. And I just think it's all on a spectrum. So it's really hard to say what's fundamentalist and what's not. And I think the more you're exposed to other ideas, other cultures, other religions, other value systems, that's when you start to realize what's fundamentalist and what's not. And if you've never been exposed, I don't think you'll ever know if you were in something fundamentalist or not, because it's all you know.
Steph, I so agree. And one of the reasons I wanted to pull these 10 characteristics up, because we've got somebody who's attending church, and we've probably got nuanced people on here. Be aware of these characteristics so that you can bring the human side into it. You can choose people over this dogma. It's to enlighten us. It's to educate us. If we are still attending church or our family ones, let's focus on the humanity, on the love, on individuals. I think just information is always good, and it educates us, I would hope, to be better people, to be less judgmental, to realize the scrupulosity, to make our own individual lives healthier, our family members. That's one of the reasons I really wanted to focus on these 10 characteristics, because I think it'd be good. I wish in my world that this could be discussed in a Relief Society class and people could say, oh, maybe I'm a little too crazy on my kids. If they watch this show, I should back off. It would be nice to make any institution we're involved in healthier. Okay, Bruce.
Yeah, my main concept on this is I stepped away from the church in 1979, pretty much. And I had nothing to do with it for 30 years, but I still kind of believed. But I had internalized how I was evil and broken. And I still see a therapist every freaking Tuesday. And we discussed my extreme need to be the good boy, to do everything right, to fix how deeply broken I am. And I'm 67 years old. And yeah, some of that stuff, and my parents, it wasn't talked about at home. They ignored me. My father was a bishop for 12 years. I was a church orphan. My parents weren't particularly, fanatical, but we never talked. And I internalized it. When I was at BYU, I would sometimes fast for 2 days in a row. Just this scrupulosity thing. So yeah, it got in my head really deep, and I have been away for decades.
Bruce, I'm sorry. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This discussion's so important. We need all the ins and outs. We need everybody's individual experiences so that we understand more and we learn and we can become better people. Let's go to the next slide. So I kind of saw the book divided into two parts: the chains that bind and the path that sets you free. And let's get into that now. Let's go to the next slide. Could somebody volunteer and read this quote for me? And first of all, before we do that, I have kind of divided the chains that bind. We're going to look at the Satmar rules. We're going to look at patriarchy, and we're going to look at family rules. We're going to look at shame, and then we're going to go into how she gets free. So, Bruce, I think you're going to read for me. If you'll read this quote, please.
Okay, chains that bind, the Satmar rules. In our community, markers of piety were very important. It is imperative that we appear at all times to be pious, to be true agents of God. Appearances are everything. They have the power to affect who we are on the inside, but also they tell the world that we are different, that they must keep away. I think much of the reason the Satmar Hasidim dressed in such a specific, conspicuous manner, so both the insiders and the outsiders will remember the vast chasm that lies between our two worlds. Assimilation, my teacher always says, is the reason for the Holocaust. We try to blend in, and God punishes us for betraying him.
Bruce, thank you. Let's go to the next slide. I just think she writes so beautifully, you guys. Now, I just put these up. I said, these are some of the rules. And, these blend. I've kind of got these categories broken down, but they definitely blend. But the dress, obviously, boy, do Satmars and Hasidics stick out. Speaking Yiddish. The Shamrim, their own police force. Remember that section in the book when the little boy that stole and they kicked him to death? The Shabbat rules. The eating kosher, the matchmaking, the rules for sex. These are some of the rules I saw that bind you. And you've got to fit in, and everybody's self-policing each other, and everybody's worried what everybody's saying. No wonder you can't get away. No wonder you can't think individually. Now, I want to throw this section out for comments. Anybody commenting on these extreme fundamentalist rules? Everybody feeling okay on that?
Okay, I can't find my hand thing.
Oh,
So
good.
I'm just hopping on. But
Good, Dana. Thank you. Thank you.
I've noticed that a lot of comments and a lot of in groups like this that are a little bit deconstructing how many people talk about religious scrupulosity. And I think those extreme rules really speak to people with religious scrupulosity, and they're soothing in ways, and they really get you into that community. So besides the fear, they just feel good.
Oh, wow, Dana. Thank you for that insight. I sure appreciate it. I don't know which way we go. Do we go Stephen or Mark?
Mark first, then Stephen.
Okay, Mark.
Okay, sounds a lot Mormon to me. Dress code, language you use in own police force. I would say the Curtin McConkie, Sabbath, what you cannot eat or drink. Okay, matchmaking. Well, you have to get married very fast. And rules for sex. Yeah, that's all Mormon.
You can see why this professor who wrote the book, it all comes to the surface, right? It doesn't matter which fundamentalist group it is. These kinds of rules and dogma, they're just in every group. Let's see. Who did I have? Did I lose this?
Stephen.
Thank you.
So, sorry. I was going down this list and I could come up with something that kind of applies to the church for pretty much every single one of them. At first, I was wondering about our own police force. I'm sure that they had one in like Nauvoo, but I was like, well, maybe we don't have that. But then I remembered the hotline that the bishops call, and Mark just said the name of the lawyers, and I can't remember what it is, even though he said it like a minute ago. But I was just thinking about all of the like Mormon Stories podcast episodes about whether it was the bishops or whether it was people who were abused by a church leader or something, and then how they didn't go to the police in their town, they went to the bishop, and then the bishop called that number, and it's just insane when you look at it from the outside.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. And again, if we can open our eyes, if we can see it, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And we can be the people on the outside, inside, maybe to bring more humanism in, or not, hopefully see our church go even more extreme. That's where I get fearful, is our church has been very moderate at times, very healthy, seeing it go down this extreme end. Bruce.
Yeah, the police force. My understanding is the church owns two different firing ranges for their own internal security to practice shooting. I had a roommate who was a BYU police officer. We had a mild relationship, but he was also spending his time entrapping gay people to fire them. When I came back from my mission, he asked me to entrap a MTC teacher, get him to come on to me so that they could fire him. And I'm looking at him and I'm going like, based on our relationship in the past, I don't think I'm going to do that. And, since then I've seen him on gay dating apps. This was 45 years ago, but no, BYU, my understanding is the police at BYU have governmental authority like a regular city police department. They may not have it extending beyond Utah, but I think in Utah, the way they control the legislature and with BYU, that they have forms of their own police force. So I think that's very in existence.
It's terrifying. Hey, and what's the honor code? The BYU honor code fits this perfectly. Okay, next slide. Could I get somebody to read this quote, please, as we talk about patriarchy? Dave will read it. Thank you, Dave.
Sure. Some girls take the diets too far. Chani Reich spends her recess time jogging up and down the hallways to burn calories she doesn't appear to be consuming. Brookie Hirsch is hospitalized for weeks because she collapsed during classes once. Even her parents couldn't get her to eat. Modesty is the highest attainment for a young woman. Indeed, the modest girls are the skinniest, hiding their natural bodies from the curious view, maintaining the innocence and purity of childhood. How long, I wonder, can girls turn their backs on impending womanhood?
Thank you very much. Next slide. Again, I'm throwing these out. I'm very open to you adding to these lists. The chains that bind, patriarchy. Women can't sing when they're 12 years old. Girls are no longer allowed to sing. Remember, her bubby would put on the old Vienna waltzes when Zadie was gone. The shaved head, the modest dressing from the neck to the ankles cannot be shown. Long sleeves. Women are separated in the synagogue. Remember, they're all jumping on top of each other to look through the hole to see the rabbi. Matchmaking and wedding. Women can't speak at the dinner table. At the Shabbat dinner table, they cannot speak. The control of female spirituality and the mikvah, the ritual bath. So these are some of what I saw coming up in the book, and I'm opening this up to discussion now. Anybody's thoughts on the patriarchy and these rules? Cameron.
Yeah, just a quick thought about the word modesty, because I heard the author use this a few times in the book, and she wasn't using it in the same context that we typically hear about it in Mormonism, because I almost always knee-jerk think, okay, modesty means how much skin are you showing? You know, your dress. Your dress, is it showing too much, skin, too revealing, too sexy, whatever. But she used the word quite a few times talking about, I think maybe like the costliness of the clothes, like how expensive things were, or modesty in the form of like language that is used, things like this. So I mean, it helped remind me that maybe we're a little hyper focused on skin that is showing and things like that, and I know they're focused on that as well. But even the word modesty, it has a different meaning in a broader culture than how we use it within our Mormon culture a lot of times. And even Dan McClellan, I've heard him talk about this on his channel, speaking to the word modesty and biblical, interpretations from the scholarship. And the word modesty in the Bible is not even used to talk about how much skin you're showing ever. It's not, never talks about that. So we have like a modern interpretation of that word in Mormonism that is not rooted to actual biblical meaning. It means more about like the expensiveness of what you wear and things like that, and the showiness of what you wear. It's nothing about how much skin you're showing or sexuality. So anyway, just a thought on that word modesty.
Thank you so much, Cameron. I love the insights. You're all going to pick things up that add so much to this discussion and richness. And I think this controlling dogmatic Mormonism has hijacked that word. And if you follow Dr. Julie Hanks, she always talks about modesty can be your language. Can be, do you have to be the show off? Do you have to be the person getting all the attention? Is it more modest to, take a little background stat? So I see people like Dr. Julie Hanks trying to regain that word, Cameron, instead of, like you said, the hyper-focusedness. Does you guys excuse me if I mute or pull my camera? I am battling a cold, so it's because I've got a cough. So I'll pop back on, but no, that's what I'm doing. Anybody else want to comment on the patriarchy? We've kind of been having the discussion all the way through. Okay, next slide. Family bonds and control. Who could read this quote for me, please? Okay, Bruce.
Okay. Chains that bind, family bonds, and control. Chaya puts her glass down and purses her lips. The thing is, she'll show up whether we like it or not. At least if we say yes, we can set conditions. I can make sure she wears a wig and a long skirt, and I will stand next to her the entire time to make sure she behaves. If she does anything out of turn, I will see that she leaves. So that was with her her mother who left the community coming to her wedding.
For the wedding. Next slide, please. Thank you, Bruce. So I wrote a few of these down. This one kind of broke my heart. No expressions of love. Remember, there was that whole part that if you tell a kid, you know, you love them or they're wonderful, you know, that they're going to get that, they're going to get, what's the word? A swelled head, the pride, and, you know, then God, you know, might shut him down. Remember her father couldn't sit still and he was fidgeting, and they kind of had this Jewish boot camp that he was sent to where he was beat. Zadie polices the house. He inspects the house before Shabbat. Again, these are these cleanliness rules, and so she's trying to hide her books. Barak is the cousin who had the psychosis that they kept in her home. Zadie kept him in the home. He was locked behind a door. The food was passed to him because heaven forbid he be put in an asylum that wasn't kosher. And Zadie controls all the money. You know, Bubby is obviously they have plenty of money when you see all the gifts that she bought. But, you know, Bubby would like, you know, a new carpet and things to make life easier for her. But Zadie's controlling that money, and that money's, he's holding fast to it. And then Zadie, as the patriarch in the family, oversees Shabbat and all the festivals. And he builds the hut. You know, that's one of the festivals where they go live under the stars and, you know, pretend that, you know, they're wandering the wilderness, the original Jews with Moses. And so these are some of these chains that bind. And I think we can all probably attest to this. And then I'd like to hear comments. I think one of the hardest things about trying to make our way with Mormonism, whether we've left or we're nuanced, is when our family doesn't see through it. And when our family is so strong and believing, they do control us. They do eye us. They do panic. They you know, we're all watching each other. We're, you know, we police whether we want to or not, whether we mean to or not. It's just part of our systems. And it's just something that's always in the air. And especially if you had strong patriarchal fathers, it can be really hard to stand up to your dad and say, I don't want to do this anymore. So anybody's comments on this slide? Okay, I think we're good. Let's go to the next one, please. And you guys, I'm terrible. I don't give the background of these quotes because I assume everybody's read the book. So here's a couple of quotes. We have 3 different quotes on the power of shame. Would anybody like to read these 3 quotes? Bruce, you're going to be our reader, it looks like. Thank you.
Chains that bind, the power of shame. God lives in my soul, and I must spend my life scrubbing my soul clean of any trace of sin so that I deserve to host his presence. Repentance is a daily chore. At each morning prayer session, we repent in advance for the sins we will commit that day. I feel unloved. My parents, yes, and by my parents, yes, by the people who reject me for being their offspring, and by my aunts and cousins who look down at me because I am evidence of a familial scandal. But mostly I feel unloved by God, who surely put me here and forgot about me. Without God's love, what chance do I have at happiness? Surely that is not who I am. I am most certainly a good girl, and I will make everyone proud of me. If I can make this work, all my shame can be erased. No one will be able to criticize my family when I'm a successful, obedient wife. Okay, some general nature of this was all part of my life growing up.
Sorry, Bruce. So sorry. Yeah, it hits hard. The shame hits hard. Can we go to the next slide? I just kind of wrote down chains that bind, the power of shame, the modesty, the constant repentance, the mental health. That comes up. Remember when she can't consummate her marriage? And then she's going into panic attacks. She's got to see a therapist. They've got her on, medication to help with it. All the LGBTQ parts that come up in this book. The fact that she's orphaned, she's got this mom that leaves and is gay, no less, and the dad's kind of wild. She's not that traditional family, right? She's raised by the grandparents. She's orphaned, and that's so shaming. Her mother at the wedding, we read that quote earlier. Again, she can't consummate the marriage. And then how she couldn't go back to Williamsburg for the first year, the shame of it all and bringing it back. Does anybody have comments on the power of shame? And I think it's a real power, you guys. I'm going to hope some people will have some comments. It's a vulnerable topic. I think as you're waiting, I'll get to you, Bruce. As you're waiting, I think one of the feelings of shame I feel the most, and I'm 61 years old, almost 62, and my parents are alive. My mother will be 63 in February. My dad's 62, and the shame that I have let my parents down. I've left the flock. I'm a pleaser. I'm an empath. And I battle the shame with my parents all the time. Bruce, let's hear from you.
Well, one example is when my cousins, who at times I've been close to, my cousin married my study partner from BYU. And I was joking because I've always been a little on the outside of things. And for their wedding, I said, do you want me to get you the Joy of Sex book? And this was 40 or 50 years ago now. And they're going like, oh, you're such a pervert, da, 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 da. And then privately she goes, yeah, we want the book. And so I've seen it in their library. They didn't hide it. But when Deborah Feldman describes not having any idea about her own anatomy and how to have sex, my cousins also told me that they had a close friend who couldn't get the extreme guilt out of her head having sex after she got married and was having to go to therapy. So I think in the Mormon culture, we're pretty screwed up on sex. I'm not sure. I don't think we're as screwed up as the Satmars.
No.
But I think we're pretty screwed up.
And again, how you were raised, the messages that came in, it's all individual. Kemi, thank you. Let's hear from Kemi.
I think that shame is something that keeps us down. It keeps us tied to that fundamentalist idea, but it doesn't necessarily have to be religious. It's just that fear of, what if I let somebody down? Like you, Jackie, I'm an oldest daughter, and a pleaser, empath, all of those things. And so it's really difficult for me to think that maybe I will be letting someone down. And a couple years ago, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. She died in September. My dad's in a facility, and they still don't know that I've left the church. They have no idea that I haven't been back. And that's partly, well, I tell myself it's because I didn't want to confuse my mom and I didn't want to cause them extra pain, but really there's a little bit of shame that comes there. And, my dad, I remember when, it just, his idea was, well, Smiths don't do this. This doesn't happen. Smiths don't get divorced. Smiths don't leave the church. And I thought they absolutely do. Maybe not in your offspring, but I have cousins who are all over the board with, with things that they've done. And so there is that shame, and it's so isolating. Like, what if I do something that hurts my family? What if I break one of these chains? Then I just feel like it keeps you kind of a prisoner in wherever you're at. And I think it's done deliberately with presenting these options and the kind of that unknown, that fear of the unknown. Well, what if I say something? What if I tell somebody? What if I do something that's different? It's so scary to step out on your own and know that maybe, that shame that will maybe or maybe not come. I think it keeps you kind of frozen in that, what it is, because you need to be brave enough to take that first step and not worry so much about that shame that comes with it.
Thank you, Kemi. And I think all of us experience shame. It doesn't just have to be directed with religion. And it's probably one of the most difficult emotions I think we have to grapple with and feel. And I appreciate the book for bringing it out and for her honesty in speaking about it. The honesty in this book from our author, Deborah Feldman, it's just mind-blowing to me. And because she was so willing to be so vulnerable and so brave and to speak so honestly, I know it was healing for me to hear. I know I learned so much from her. So I'm really appreciative. Anybody else want to comment on shame? If not, we'll move forward. Yes, Peter, let's hear from you.
Hi, everyone. First, let me just thank you for allowing me to join your book club. I'm a relatively new member. This is the first time I've had a speaking role, so thank you for that. One of the things that stood out to me about the shame is just how coercive it is and how it's weaponized in the Hasidic tradition, and so intentionally so. And I'm looking at page 194, where it says Hasidic men aren't allowed to masturbate. Eli repeatedly tells me, as a result of this rule, he explains to me, I am obligated to satisfy him so that his sexual frustration doesn't build up. If I refuse, I would be forcing him to sin, thereby carrying the burden of his wrongdoing. Like, if you've ever, it's like you only need to read that one passage to know that this is a man-made tradition, right? If you don't satisfy my sexual needs, you're going to cause me to sin. So it just sort of stood out to me as how shame is sort of weaponized, not just in Hasidic tradition, but in so many Christian traditions as well.
Thank you so much, Peter. I had that underlined as well. I think the hardest thing for me putting together this presentation was what I had to leave out. And the quotes are so poignant and so deeply felt. So it was very difficult for me to leave out, but thank you for bringing that out. It's a lot for us to think about. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, we've left the chains that bind. Let's move to the path to freedom. Would anybody like to read, or is Bruce going to be our reader?
I can do it.
Okay, thank you, Melissa.
In the physics of imagination, this is the rule. A child can only accept a just world. I waited for a long time for someone to come along and rescue me, just like in the stories. It was a bitter pill to swallow when I realized that no one would ever pick up the glass slipper that I left behind.
Keep going.
I wasn't equipped as a child to make room for arguments that would undermine every single choice made for me, that would shatter the foundations of my very existence. I would see that I had to believe everything I was taught, if only to survive. For a long time, I wouldn't be ready to accept that my worldview could be wrong.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's go to the next slide. Path to Freedom, the books. Yeah, I mean, we're all in a book club, right? I mean, I'll get emotional even thinking about it. And how many of you have read these books? I mean, James and the Giant Peach and Matilda, that's where she learned that she was like those children who didn't fit in. The Chosen, does anybody just raise a hand? Does anybody read The Chosen? Yeah. That's where he learned to argue and individuate. And she realized she couldn't do it then. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, to escape the poverty. That was the first book that she thought, could I escape like the author in The Tree Grows in Brooklyn? Is there a possibility for me to escape? Pride and Prejudice. Who's read Pride and Prejudice? Oh my gosh, And isn't it interesting? She went right to the classics. That's what stayed with her. The Role of Status in Marriage. Little Women. She didn't fit in like Joe. Anna Green Gables. win family over in community. She was so shocked that Anne could win them all over. And she was that precocious child too, Deborah Feldman was, but she couldn't win them over. And then, as she gets into college she takes the poetry class and she reads William's Wordsworth, and college started to give her a new worldview. It started to allow her to see beyond the Satmar world. These books, I think, are close to all of our hearts. And then I'm going to open it up for discussion. I've been watching some interviews by Deborah Feldman, and I really highly recommend you go put her in the YouTube. She is amazing. And she said that when she finished this book, Unorthodox, she died. She shut the writing down. She shut the book down. And she said that girl died. And she said, I had to create a personality because I never had a personality. You're not allowed to develop a personality in the Satmar system. And she said, I did what I always did. I turned to books. And it was from books that I started to develop my personality. And she said when she moved to Berlin, there are two authors who wrote about the Holocaust that have never made it to the United States. And I really apologize. I did not have time to write them down. But one survivor saw the humanism, and he was going to make the world a better place. And he wanted to build up humanity. The other man ended up taking his life. He saw the hopelessness. He saw that the world was horrible. And she said, you have to understand both points of view, and you have to realize they're both viable. So she always turns to books to learn and to understand. And one of the reasons Deborah Feldman went to Berlin after she wrote this book and everything is she was raised in the Satmar tradition. And we remember the part in the book where Bubby says that Hitler had chicken feet. And if you took his shoes off, you would have seen that he was a demon. And all the Germans were anti-Semitic. Every German was anti-Semitic, and they were demons. And she talked in this interview and said that Bubby said that every German was infected with anti-Semitism. Listen to the word infected. It's all this dehumanizing. It's all this demon speaking. So Deborah said, she went to the eye of the storm and she said, I got to figure this out. And she moved to Berlin to find out, are they really demons, and to live up close. And she says, in my community, I am best friends with Christians, Muslims, and Islams. And she cried through this. And she said, why we are able to be such a close community and why we trust each other is because we are all bonded by humanity. It is humanity that bonds us. And she was talking about after this whole Palestinian Israel war has spun up, as the terrorists went in and slaughtered the Jewish people. And she said, we see the pictures, and she says, we can't handle the pictures. Humankind can't handle the pictures because they dehumanize us, and we can't look at them. It's too much. And we step away. We can't process it. But she says we can process stories. We can process stories. And she said one story that she read from this is that there was a man on the kibbutz, and he was defending his family with a pistol, and his wife and children were slaughtered. And his wife would go into Gaza 3 days a week and pick up children from Gaza that needed dialysis. And she would drive them to get to the dialysis and then take them back. These were very secular, modern, liberalist form of Jewish people who were uneasy with the Gaza situation, were uneasy with this, level of living where the Jews were superior and had more power. And his wife was going in and bringing these people in and helping them. And they slaughtered his wife. And he said, no more. This man who survived, he says, I will not do that anymore. I am done. And Deborah Feldman started to cry. And she said, all I can say is I pray whatever comes up in the future in this world. And she said, we have to reckon with Israel and Jerusalem because it's worldwide. It is a point that the whole world has to reckon with. But she said, I pray I never lose my humanity. And it stayed with me. I watched that 2 days ago, and it has not left me. And that's how I always feel. I choose people over dogma. And I pray, if anything we get out of this book, it's that we don't lose our humanity. Now, I'd like to open that up to discussion.
Jackie, you turned your video off, and we're at about closing time.
Okay, well, maybe that's where we end it. I think I have 2 more slides. And I kind of like, let's go to the next one. I like ending it with Deborah. Have we moved it?
Yes.
Okay, let's just read this quick. I think I have 2 more things and we'll read it. Let me just read it. When I grow older, I would realize that the dangers that movie presented existed in my own community as well. Only they were shrouded in secrecy and allowed to fester there. And I would come to the conclusion that society that was honest about its perils was better than one that denied its citizens the knowledge and preparation needed to fend off their approach. If you are forced to confront your fears on a daily basis, they disintegrate like illusions when viewed up close. Let's go one more slide. Maybe being always protected made me more fearful, and I would later dip cautiously into the outside world, never allowing myself to be submerged completely, and always jerking back into the familiarity of my own life when my senses were overwhelmed. For years, I would stand with a foot in each sphere, drawn to the exotic universe that lay on the other side of the portal, wrenched back by the warnings that sounded like alarm bells in my mind. Let's go. One more. That's the timeline. We know it. You read the book. One more. I'm going to end on this note. It was shame that kept me as far away from Williamsburg as I could get the first year. It takes a long time for shame to fade away, but surprisingly, underneath it, there is pride, awed by the sense of distance I now felt toward what had once been my only home. I not only saw my life with estranged eyes, and suddenly my past struck me as wildly colorful and exotic. What once seemed to me the most intolerable version of a mundane life was now transformed into a rich and mysterious culture. I would say that's a very healed person, when she can look back on her life and see the color and the richness and the goodness. And I was going to end with that, and we'll end it there, that maybe we all individually self-reflect. Have we integrated our past into our present? Is there healthy parts of it we've integrated? Are we only seeing the bad? Are we still deeply wounded? And I want to acknowledge our deep wounds. And let's self-reflect, and let's come out of this book vowing to be better people. And I'll leave it at that. And thank you, everyone, for your comments and participation.
Jackie, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. That was an incredible presentation. You allowed us all to express ourselves, and you also gave us so much to think about. I'm really going to be thinking about that last slide, because I feel like, a lot of us have stepped away, do not live in Utah anymore. And that's a very different experience from those of us that are still here. It's like we're still living among our people, right? Yet trying to have a different life. So I'm going to think about that. That's interesting. Anyway, excellent job, Jackie, so much. Let's move to our next slide. I'm going to hold up my book here. Next month, on the 14th, we're going to be talking about second class saints. Is Ron here? I have not looked through the participant list. Are you here, Ron? There he is. He's going to give us a little preview.
All right, so Second Class Saints, a fabulous book, tells us all about the origins and the history and the whole process of going from the ban on priesthood and temple ordinances for Black people all the way through all the struggles they had, trying to convince church leaders and other people that this should be lifted, or it's not doctrinal, or any of these things. And also it goes on to the post ban of trying to help people understand what caused this, or how people reacted after the ban and carried on various teachings, and kind of where the church stands today with the priesthood and Black people. So, fascinating book. I've listened to all 17 episodes of that Mormon Stories series, and it's a fantastic series. I think reading the book might even be faster than watching all 40 some odd hours of Mormon stories. But yeah, it's wonderful. It's lots of information, lets you see the inside happenings of what all of the church leaders are thinking and what they're writing in their diaries and telling their close associates. So he got some amazing insight as to what the process was and how the church went about doing this.
Oh, excellent, Ron. We're really excited that you're the one that's going to be presenting, and that hopefully, for sure, Dr. Matthew Harris will be on. And I'll mention this about him. He's so interesting. When he told us, that he was in the final stages of putting this book together, and he told us kind of his philosophy on how he puts together these historical books. He compares it to a Thanksgiving dinner. And he says a lot of people write, and they're comfortable writing a historical book like this when they have sort of the outside sources. He compares it to like the rolls or the Jello salad or the gravy. He goes, I won't write a book unless I have the turkey. And that means he has, as Ron alluded to, journal entries, taped conversations, meeting minutes, things like that. He has the turkey. It's the real stuff. You don't just have a glimpse into it, you're there during this whole process. And I think that's why this book is so important. And Landon, our co-founder here of the book club, he was reading this book on a business trip back, to Japan. So he had a long time to read. And he would text me now and then and say, I am so angry. I see that these men that I revered in that era, the 80s, the 70s, when we were growing up, young adults, a lot of them were horrible villains, actually, in this scenario. And so it really had an impact on him. I'm very curious to see how the rest of you are going to feel about this, because like I said, it not only pulls the curtain, it puts you right there with a seat at the table, and you can see what they're doing and the manipulation and the racism. And I think everybody's forever changed after reading this or watching the Mormon Stories interviews. So this is going to be one of our more important books, I think, that we've ever done on book club. So excited about that. And we'll get more information about exactly when Matt's going to pop in, either first or second hour or whatever. So let's go for a few more announcements really quick. Just want to remind everybody, go back one, sorry, that our book club meetings are always on YouTube, like a couple days up to a week after the meeting on the Good Book Club for Post-Mormons. You can also catch up on all our past meetings, fun to watch. And you can find the Good Book Club audio podcast wherever you listen to your audio podcast. So good to catch up, fun to be able to listen to the past. We also have the Good Media Club. It's another page on Facebook where we just curate things that are more like documentaries, series, movies. We just kind of put little announcements about things that are coming out. So not only books, but media. You can just join that Facebook page. That's kind of fun. And of course, we have Mormonish Podcast where Landon and I are co-hosts, and we often bring people from the book club and have them do their presentations over there or talk to people. So it definitely, Mormonish was spawned out of the Good Book Club. So very, very much linked. And you can look for that anywhere audio podcasts are found, or on YouTube also. So that's kind of fun. If this is your first time here, some people said it was, and you'd like to actually be a member of the Good Book Club, get all the information. If you don't want to go on social media, you can just send me an email to thegoodbookclub@mail.com. I'll put you on our email mailing list, and you'll get the links and the information that way. And you can also just find us on Facebook, The Good Book Club, and just request to join. And we put links and information and talk about the books throughout the month on that page. We're also on Instagram. So if you do send me an email at mail.com, check your spam. For some reason, things tend to go to spam, which is weird. So now we'll end this part of the Good Book Club meeting. Thanks, everybody.